Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with another 80s slasher film, and this time it is 1983's The Prey. Now, I say 83 because that's when it was actually released, although it was made, shot, and produced in 1980. It was directed by Edwin Brown, produced by his wife Summer, and they both wrote it together. And this was actually, for the both of them, this was their first non-pornographic film that they worked on. They had only done porn before this. It was made for only $150,000, so cheap as hell. And it stars Debbie Thureson, Steve Bond, Lori Lethin, who was the older sister and final girl on Bloody Birthday. She was also in Return to Horror High. Jackson Bostwick, and this was actually Jackie Coogan's final film role. He died in 1984. Which Jackie Coogan, I mean, he started with Chaplin in The Kid back in 21. He played Uncle Fester in The Addams Family in the TV show. I believe he was one of the Little Rascals. Could be wrong on that. Was he? No, I'm thinking of Jackie Cooper, who was also Perry White in the Superman films. But this also, wasn't there a Strasberg in this? Oh no, that was in Bloody Birthday. Yeah, Susan Strasberg, daughter of Lee Strasberg, was in Bloody Birthday. But anyway, so 1983 is The Prey. I actually liked this film. I see why a lot of people don't, either initially or retrospectively. It is a slower paced slasher film, like many of the ones that I've been reviewing lately. It does have some kills placed throughout, but it is a very slow pace that picks up towards the end. But there are some interesting aspects about this, which the husband-wife director-producer team actually were inspired by both Halloween and The Hills Have Eyes, which, if you look at it, it kind of is like that. A slasher film, a group of people vacationing in this area, being hunted by this deformed killer. It's not full Hills Have Eyes, although the ending kind of points at where Hills Have Eyes would eventually go, but set in the Colorado Rockies. And when this was made, they were told, because there was this executive producer who worked on the film Human Experiments, who told the director, make a horror film shot in the woods. That's what he wanted. Which at that time, in 1980, when they made this, was not a popular thing in horror films. So this was made right at, must have been made right before Friday the 13th was made, which was also 1980. But, of course, now we know horror films and woods are almost synonymous with each other. In slasher films alone, I mean, Friday the 13th and its sequels, Madman, Just Before Dawn, The Burning, also count as, which The Burning could also be a summer camp movie, but going by that, there's also Sleepaway Camp. But it's just weird to think that there was a period where horror films, and more specifically slashers, the woods was not a popular setting. So that was interesting thing to read about. But then, of course, when it came out in '83, a shit ton were made. It's not a heavily dialogue-driven film. I mean, we have characters talking to each other, but it's actually quite atmospheric. There's also a lot of stock footage of, views from the mountains and the woods, streams and creeks and trees, which a lot of people complained about. They thought it was sort of padding the running time and just stock footage, just for using stock footage, but I thought it actually helped with the atmosphere. It helped set the tone, like the isolation out in the woods. I thought they were shot well. And I like how dialogue, like when there is dialogue, there's a lot of it, but then there's also long periods without it. Also, you'll get POV shots of the woods from either the killer or the characters. I thought it was an interesting choice, and I enjoyed it. It felt different. But it opens up in 1948 with just this forest fire, and you hear screams and cries. And then we jump 32 years later, 1980. There's this elderly couple camping, eating dinner. The wife walks away to clean her dishes in the creek, hears her husband scream. When she comes back, he's been decapitated, and then she gets killed with his axe. Which I also really like the cover of this. The tagline is a little misleading. It's not human and it's got an axe. It is human. But I like how the axe is up against a tree with like a nightgown on it. So then sometime later, we're introduced to our group of characters. There's 3 teenage couples. And I mean, they all do have their kind of personality. Like the Lori Lethin, she's kind of the, I guess, more so reserved one. The one who I think you're supposed to believe is going to be the final girl. She's dating this sort of prankster, obnoxious guy. Then you have, who was the Gail Gans as Gail, who's like a bubbly one. And then Debbie Thureson is Nancy, who I guess is your every woman, I guess. And I don't really remember the guys' names or really the characters' names of who goes to who, because it's not really a character-driven, it's not like Friday the 13th. Almost every one of these videos I've said Friday the 13th. Well, but Friday the 13th really did help set the standard for what the 80s were going to be. Where you can be like, oh, okay, so, that person's the goofball. That's the jockey guy. That's the bookworm. That's the slut. But they all go camping together, and I really like the campfire scene where they're telling stories. Like, one guy tells a version of the monkey's paw. This other guy tells a story about the stars and I think it's Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I think it's Roman. I don't know. But then also we followed this, I think he's a park ranger who's played by I actually don't even remember his name. Mark O'Brien. So he's played by Jackson Bostwick, who was also in the Saturday morning show Shazam. He was the contestant on the dating game. Okay. And he's kind of goofy. There's some scenes where he looks like a guy playing Zac Efron, playing Ted Bundy. He's talking to Gale a little bit, then they go their own way. Like, the group goes up camping, he goes back to the ranger station. He's kind of goofy. He's not quite Last House on the Left, dopey cop, but he is kind of goofy. Like this scene where he's telling a joke to a deer as he's feeding it. But the Jackie Coogan played was he like the ranger, like superior? Yeah, head ranger. How did I forget that? But anyways, shortly after the campfire story, we kind of see how each couple is together. Like, Lori Lethin was dating a guy who jumped out of a bush and scared her. She fainted. He's trying to get laid. She's totally shutting him off because he scared her. The couple with Gail Gans, she's like, tell me you love me. Oh, you don't love me. Do you love me? And then the other couple with Debbie Thureson, they're romantic and passionate with each other. But Gail Gans and her boyfriend are the first ones to die. She gets smothered with the sleeping bag. And which first you're thinking, oh, this movie's kind of dragged and she's just getting smothered. But then we just see this sort of beastly hand come out, grab him by the throat. I mean, we got blood spraying. You can kind of tell it's latex, but, you know, it's practical. Got to give it that. It's practical. It does look good. You know, I always thought even if you can kind of tell that it looks fake, it's practical, so there's still the effort there. But I thought the actual viscera of it looked really good. And then the next morning, the other two couples wake up, realize that couple is left, their gear is gone, and they continue with their hiking and swimming and whatever. Park ranger, he tells this long joke about a frog having babies to this deer. Not with the deer, he's telling the joke to a deer. And then he talks to Jackie Coogan, and Jackie Coogan tells him the story about how back in 48 there was this huge forest fire, and he found this one boy who was burnt beyond recognition. So kind of setting up the history of the killer. This young, I guess he was part of a gypsy family, and he was burnt beyond recognition. And yeah, it is still kind of slow, but I like the scenes without dialogue, and I do like the stock footage, like the National Geographic footage of the mountains and the trees, because I think it helps set the atmosphere. It does help establish, okay, these are the woods. There's no people here. There's no place to run. There's no place to hide, really. I thought it helped that. I thought the lack of dialogue really helped. I actually, might sound weird, but I thought it helped the setting more. So it might have lacked in characterization and, you know, character depth, but I thought it helped put us in the environment more. The remaining two guys go to, I think it's called like Suicide Peak. They want to, you know, what's the word? Rappel down it, I think is what it's called. Yeah. While the two girls stay behind, they just lay out in the sun. Well, the guy staying up top gets killed. The other guy, the line gets cut, so he falls to his death. You don't really see anything, but his scream as he falls alerts the other two girls. They run up. They see the one that was killed up top. And then you have some things that kind of feel out of place, like this slow motion, like they're running away in slow motion, and there's all the... when they continue to run, Lori Lethin steps in one of those traps that pulls you upside down. You swing around, but she hits a tree. And it fucks her face all up and kills her. Which also earlier, the Ranger's walking through the woods, and he sees these, they're not vultures, I guess buzzards. I always associate them with the desert, but I guess that's what they are. They're pecking at this meat, and we hear all these flies. So he shoos them away, and he looks, and it's the girl, Gail, that got smothered. And I mean, she's kind of rotten, being pecked at by the birds. Again, the effects. It's not a gore film. Like, it's not an over-the-top, like, Intruder or Pieces kind of slasher. But it has what it needs to, and I appreciate it. Which, John Carl Buechler did the effects for this, so that's also, you know, something really cool. May he rest in peace. I know he passed away a couple years ago, but he is one of the best from the 80s. I mean, he's from the Savini era. I know he's directed some bad movies, but he directed Friday the 13th Part 7, which unfortunately got raped by the MPA. And we'll never see his effects, but I've always liked John Carl Buechler's effects, and he did them for this film. So now it's just Debbie Thureson. She's running away now that Lori Lethin's been killed. Park Ranger now knows something's going on, and eventually they meet up, and we see the killer, who I want to get the actor's name, because he was Carol Strachan, cast as the monster. Oh, it's Lurch. Go figure. Lurch in the 90s Addams Family films. He was the apparition in Gerald's Game. He was also in Dr. Sleep. He's, how tall is he? 7 feet tall. He was chosen because of his size. He kind of looks like Toxie, you know. It's the same kind of idea. Like deformed, well, like he's got the deformed look. The makeup looks similar to Toxie, but he's tall, slender, wearing all black. Grabs a hold of Park Ranger, crushes his throat, which we get this cool, like, super up close camera kind of going like this, and you got blood coming out of him as his throat's being crushed. I also like the music. It's got your typical slasher movie music, but there's one part in particular, like when the Ranger's walking through the woods, or we get some of the stock footage, where it's this high violin sound that sounds eerily similar to the scene in The Shining when Danny goes upstairs to get his fire engine and Jack has him sit on his lap and he just talks to him. Kind of like that. So I like the music. And then it's just Debbie Thureson left, and he kind of looks at her, goes towards her, reaches towards her, and then we get more establishing shots, some shots of wildlife, and then we just see this cave, and as the camera zooms into the darkness of the cave, we hear a baby's cries, implying he had a kid with her. So, yeah, it's not your typical hack and slash. It kind of is to an extent, but it's not, you know, it's not The Burning. It's not a gore or big effects film, but when you do have a kill with effects, they are there. They are present, and they are pulled off well, again, by John Carl Buechler. It is slow. There's not really a story. There's no story to pull it along. And throughout many chunks of the film, there's very little to no dialogue, but I actually think that helps it. And I thought the stock footage helped the atmosphere and the setting and feeling immersed in it. So I understand why people don't like it or found it dull or boring or pointless. I actually enjoyed it. It felt different because of those aspects, despite being another, killer in the woods movie with campers. The acting wasn't overly bad like you might get in these early 80s slashers. They weren't mind-blowingly good, but they were passable. And it just, for a first-time actual film to be made by a director who had only done porn before this, I thought it came out well. I enjoyed it. We still had, let's see, the old couple, the first couple, the second couple, boyfriend. We still had 8 kills throughout the whole film at, an hour, 20 minutes. So that's not bad. Just the periods in between are so slow-paced that it feels forever. But I thought those slow-paced areas were utilized just fine. I actually really enjoyed The Prey, and I know there's an Arrow release, which I know is expensive as hell, but I would love to own this one day, make it part of my slasher collection. But that is 1983's The Prey. Thank you for watching.